Okay, so I'm on live. Nice. So we're gonna take a look at the vaccine rollout across the world. Today's June 21st, 21, and we have some information, from about 18 countries that have a vaccination rate of 34% to 68, 69% and higher. So basically, we're going to take a look at these countries. So a lot of these countries, are in the millions. So United States, of course, 333 million. UK is pretty big. UAE is pretty big. Mongolia's, 3.3 million. Israel's like 10 million. So, these are sizable countries. Even Seychelles, which is only 100,000. You have to remember that a lot of the clinical trials performed in the United States in the winter, they did not have a population or sample size of this country. So, Seychelles having a higher population than any clinical trial, and it being in the real world, you have to consider its information as somewhat relevant. I would not dismiss it out of hand. So we're going to just go country to country. We'll switch back to some tabs, to get contextual information about the rollout and other factors that affect infections and case numbers. So currently in the Seychelles, we see that the case and the wave actually started during the rollout. And that's a very unfortunate situation because, despite having close to 70% of the population completely vaccinated, I'm talking, full vaccination, they experienced this massive wave. And, let's go back and see if we got any people signing on, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Stream settings, and I haven't used YouTube streaming in quite a while, but I'm just going to post this over to Facebook. What's this? Live streaming. Let's see if we can get a preview. YouTube. Not found. Okay, so I'm not able to post this over in Facebook. All right, so that's pretty bad. Seychelles pretty bad. Not a good not good evidence that the vaccine is actually helping or making a difference, whatever you want to call it. San Marino, they are a small country. They're basically like the worst country in the world when it comes to number of cases per million, I believe. They're number 4. And, they had a high number of tests, so almost 2 tests per person. The population, again, very small, 34,000 people. So, given their case numbers, 5,000 out of 34. So 1/7 of the population has been fully diagnosed as having full-blown COVID. And if you sort of try to imagine, I wouldn't say extrapolate because these are very inexact numbers, but, a pretty large portion of the population probably has immunity to conferred immunity, whether they've come down with a full-blown COVID case or not, to the coronavirus. And so they are probably having some sort of natural herd immunity, vaccine or not. Unfortunately, again, there is this sort of weekly trends thing here, which is different from the main Worldometers page, right? So the main page and weekly trends. So weekly trends shows you, you know, what the changes in the past week, right? And unfortunately, they don't have that information for San Marino. So I'm just going to quickly go to Israel, and I'll say right now that out of the top 18 most vaccinated countries in the world, Israel seems to be the only country that seems to be the case that vaccines make a difference. But that's not clear, and we'll see that in a second. So, Israel is a very modern country, a lot of good infrastructure, good healthcare, lots of coronavirus policies, and vaccination. So, so this is the first good look at it. Aside from Seychelles, you can argue, Seychelles is an island country, blah, blah, blah. And then they got the Chinese vaccine, not the American one. Kind of like whatever. So, Israel, 57% vaccinated. However, they did experience the peak, prior to the rollout. And then they had sort of mini waves. To me, like the reporting here in Israel doesn't seem very good because we have a lot of sharp, acute angles in the curves, which is not good. Usually, what you expect to find is sort of rolled off waves, and jagged lines tell me that the reporting is a little spotty and in some cases delayed by a couple of days, a few days even. So, and you can see that, these holes in the reporting every few days means that basically there was no reporting. So no country has perfect reporting, but, Israel's is actually not as good as the US's. So the question here is this decline in case numbers and, sort of approaching very low noise level, background level cases of COVID, is that due to the vaccine, or is that sort of a natural progression of a variant ending out its wave? And that's really hard to say. It could be one or the other or both. And as we move on to deaths, we see that the deaths do decline as well. It is one of the claims of the virus manufacturers that deaths and severity of symptoms are decreased with the vaccine. That's a curious claim because that's a sort of unintended side effect, I would say. Either the stuff is going to work or it doesn't. You get COVID or you don't. That's sort of the goal here. Anything else is not really relevant to me. But moving on to Malta, we see that they had kind of wildly up-climbing cases during their rollout, and then, boom, they had a decline. Is this due to the vaccine? Is it due to the wave just dying off? And again, Malta, very small country, 57% vaccinated, and they don't have case numbers for preceding deaths. And I don't know, do they? Malta. Yes, they do. So they've had very few cases, minus 20 in the past week, cases 18 in the past week, 440,000 people, so a little less than 500,000. You can see, some of the worst, the hot spots in the world right now. Those would be Seychelles, Mongolia, Uruguay. All three of these countries are highly, highly vaccinated, by the way. And so, the worst countries in the world right now are the most vaccinated countries in the world. So is that, Maldives is up there in top vaccinated countries. Bahrain is up there. Chile is up there. Paraguay is up there. And, if we, the top 18 countries, basically we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the top 18 countries that are seeing the worst case numbers currently are also the most vaccinated top 18, top in the top 18 countries in the world. So very disconcerting overlap. I don't know if you want to call it a coincidence, a correlation, a relationship, but that's just where it stands. And I will actually show you that in a more clear example on this spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet is from 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, June 17th. Today's the 21st, and what I did was made the spreadsheet at that time. This is the vaccination rate of the top 18 countries. Next to the country name is how they're doing in terms of cases per million, right? So, never mind like current case numbers, but total case numbers. So, 6, 4, 21, 48, 5, 100, 98, 36, and so on for these countries. And I don't know if I can blow this up so you can see it better, but I will try. So I'll try to zoom it to 400. And so you might be able to see this a little better now. But these countries which have high vaccination rate also happen to be, the most infected countries in the world, right? So not a great look. I mean, that's not a great look. So, all right, moving back to these countries and how they're doing with the rollout. The UK, obviously very modern, lots of vaccines. Of course, they've developed their own AstraZeneca one. Unfortunately for them, the case numbers are climbing up. So they ended a wave, but they seem to be going into a new wave, which is not good evidence that vaccines are making a difference. So the deaths are down again. That may lead you to theorize that the vaccines do help with deaths, but it also may be the case that the new variants or strains, clades, families, whatever you want to call them, mutations, are less lethal than the prior versions. And, you have to think like a virus. It's not the case that, a virus just wants is a human term, but a term that viruses don't think about. They don't think. They just continue to propagate, and they're organic machines. They keep propagating, right? And if they need to make adjustments to their environment to adapt to the new environment to keep propagating, they will do that. They don't intend to kill the host. They're not aware that they're killing people. That's just an effect, an outcome of propagating, right? And so if a mutation occurs and it's able to propagate without killing the host, that's a natural thing. It may or may not be the case, right? So we don't know which one it is. Is it the vaccine making symptoms less and deaths less, or is it the case that the mutation is just less lethal? We don't know. So, the claims from the virus manufacturers seems to be early at best, and spurious at most probably. The United States is an interesting case in that, despite this massive rollout, the current caseload is 5.1 million compared to a year ago at this time, we were at 1.1 million, right? So the case numbers are 5 times worse, despite a massive rollout. The decline in case numbers is not as steep as the increase of the wave, which is disconcerting. If you're one that hopes the vaccine is making a difference. So the deaths are declining more steeply, so that's good. It could be, again, it could be the vaccine making a difference. It could be the natural progression of mutations in the strains of the viruses that make it less lethal. It could be improved healthcare mitigation, convalescence, and I understand things like plasma therapy haven't panned out. We've thrown the kitchen sink, the proverbial kitchen sink, at this thing. Vitamin D, vitamin K, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and all the rest. So, we've gone through ventilation and oxygen, and it's just sort of endless, right? So I don't know. With the United States, to me, it's sort of inconclusive at best if vaccines are making a difference. Hungary, experienced a big wave during their rollout, unfortunately. Peak infection cases, 270,000 deaths. They peaked. What's the size of Hungary? 45%. Where are they now? So they're a sizable population, on the size of Israel. So Hungary's basically 10 million people. Israel, 10 million people, almost identical sizes, 9 point something million, and basically not the same, in terms of case numbers, but Israel's worse, right? So let's see, Israel, back to this. So they had, no, I want this one, Israel, and so they have 850K cases, while Hungary had 807. Interesting. So they're very kind of similar. In similar vaccination rates, so it's a good comparison, Israel and Hungary. Just trying to keep that in mind. But like Israel, that the case numbers are going down, not down to this floor level that we like to see, but getting better. So Qatar's rich Middle Eastern country, sizable population, but again, they experienced a big wave. Their second wave less severe than the first wave. However, they did experience it during the rollout. So, up to you. Is this natural? Is this a vaccine? Is it both? Hard to say, and probably impossible to separate. Right? Iceland, very small country. Let's skip it. UAE. This is what I like to call an example of poor reporting. So, one thing you see in just about all countries, especially in the daily deaths, is days where there are no deaths. And so basically what it tells you is that they don't have daily reporting on things like these. And so let's just make sure. Well, actually, this is a consequence of they just put spaces in between every day. So, but well, let's see, October 3, October 4. So they did not have a day here, October 4th, where they reported deaths, or there were no deaths. It's hard to say. But anyway, if there's a lot of variation, if it's jiggly, if it's wiggly, then there's probably lagging in reporting. If there's acute angles like this and like this and like this, there's probably inaccurate reporting. So, and it seems like, yes, the less developed a country is, the more inaccurate the graph seems to be. It's probably not because of the development, but infrastructure, right? So, and the means to the manpower to do all this reporting, because it does take a lot of labor to do it. So UAE, they started rollout. They were at peak during rollout. It declines rapidly, but it comes back up, goes a little bit down, comes back up. So, and where did they stand? So the UAE stands at 40% vaccination, full. It's like either 2 shots of this or 1 shot of that. I don't know which one they got. Moving on to Monaco. Monaco's a very tiny country, so kind of like we'll skip it, but it is going up. Uruguay is a strong case, like Mongolia, that the vaccines are actually not making a difference. It's clearly getting much worse, despite the vaccination. Mongolia, Uruguay, they both have delayed the virus onset as long as possible, humanly possible. Uruguay, I don't know if they cut off their borders. Mongolia did. Mongolia, for the first 6 months at least, they immediately closed their borders to China at the very beginning of the pandemic in Wuhan. So they closed their borders to China. I don't know when they did it with Russia, but that's what they did. And obviously, if you isolate yourself, close yourself off from the world, you will not get infected. But once you open up, you get it. And you can vaccinate all you want, it seems like, in the case of Mongolia and Uruguay. But you're still going to get infected. So, not... And I don't know if they got Sinovac, the Chinese vaccine in Uruguay, like they did in Mongolia. But whatever they're getting doesn't seem to be helping. Singapore has is an autocratic style of governance, not like a socialist dictatorship, like Venezuela or Cuba or something, or China, but they do, have very strict rules. For instance, if you are caught not wearing a mask publicly in public transport, you will go to jail for 6 months, right? They're infamous for caning people, whipping people literally as punishment for littering, chewing gum or something like this. And so, they probably just managed to bring down the initial infection, the wave, by just doing masking and isolation, but they kept it almost to zero, and then they start inoculating, quote unquote, people, and then unfortunately the floor level kind of keeps creeping up, unfortunately. So, but it's not too much of a concern, basically, because they only have like 1 death a day every few weeks. So good on Singapore. Authoritarianism kind of works. Serbia is a case where, again, they experienced a wave, unfortunately, during the rollout. Not a lot of deaths. I assume it's a small country. I don't know, how big are they? Serbia. They're big. They're like 9 million people, so it's not inconsequential. Maldives is the last place that we're going to look at. Like Uruguay, like Mongolia, they experienced their first big wave during the rollout. at 25,000 cases at their peak, in the at the most inoculated they've been. And what does their rollout look like? They're a third rolled out, right? 1/3 completely vaccinated again, and their population 500,000. So there it is. I think I could go through the biggest countries in the world, but maybe I'll leave that to other people to look at. They're not highly vaccinated. I will just leave it at Japan, which is the 11th largest country in the world. Virtually no vaccination. At I think they're like around 6. Well, they have 9 million people vaccinated, and they have I have to go like this. There we go. Japan. And they are at 7%. They were at 6 yesterday, so they're kind of up in the vaccines there. So Japan, they have, what's their population? 126 million. Or like 1/3, little more than that of the U.S. The U.S. has 333 million. So Japan has like 200 million less people. So let's say they're just 1/3 the size of America, and that is stuffed into the size of a state, let's say of California or Texas. Excuse me, and so, but you gotta shrink it by 20%. So because 80% of Japan is uninhabitable due to the forests and mountain ranges. And so it's really taking the, like half the U.S., let's say the east side of the Mississippi, and just putting them in New England. So in essence, Japan, you cannot isolate, right? You cannot separate people from another. It's just physically impossible due to the population density. And they did not really issue lockdown for most of the country, except for prefectures in Tokyo, maybe other big cities like Kobe, Osaka. And so what you have is no isolation. What you have is no vaccines during this time period. You had no contact tracing. They did not implement contact tracing. And they did not implement testing. So all the typical, 5 things that people look to do, social distancing, testing, contact tracing, and lockdown, plus masks, those would be the 5. The only thing they did was masks. And so it was largely successful. And even despite, these peaks, current peaks here, 77,000 cases out of 126 million is effectively nothing, practically virtually nothing, compared to the U.S., which has 5 million currently, right? It's not even a comparison, right? If you triple this number, it's 75,000, times 3, then you got 150. 100, 200, 225, 1,000 cases versus 5 million cases, right? And so it's just no comparison. So the case of Japan versus the United States suggests that masks are the most effective measure, against coronavirus. Nothing else seems to make a difference. So that's we'll leave it for today. If you watched, thanks for hanging on, and please leave comments, give a like if you care. Don't subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. You can subscribe if you want to, but kind of not in it for the likes here. So see you later. Bye.